Hey folks, this is Ben Gessel, making a quick October kind of themed video here. I probably made something else like this in the past, I'm sure I have, but we're gonna get into this a little bit here. This might be a lengthier video. So as we go through this stuff, most of you guys are probably adults watching this, maybe a few teens, who knows. The question is, what are we as adults really afraid of, or whatever, teens, but in movies, etc. But of course, as I should specify that on the left side here are real life phobias that many of us are afraid of, and I'll explain what I'm afraid of. But the left side of this page is more real life stuff. Right side, movies. I guess the movies would cross over with video games as well and all that stuff. Okay, so let's get into this here. Let's go over the left column. So this is real life. There's a whole bunch of these phobias, and a phobia is just a irrational fear. It's a fear of something that's technically beyond what most of us are afraid of. So it's hard to know if, unless I've never really been diagnosed about phobias, but what's irrational, because a lot of this stuff, I couldn't tell you if I have an irrational fear of something, but I just know what I'm most afraid of, basically, in real life. And obviously, fear of heights is something that I think it's very universal, that I definitely am a part of that group. Of course, we have aerophobia, fear of flying, arachnophobia, fear of spiders. Now, of course, the dash stuff. Dotted is hardly not much at all fear, but a little bit of fear. The dashed is like a medium level of fear. So I have a healthy fear of spiders. It's not extreme. Banana spiders or those jumping spiders are a different story, I suppose. Yeah. Anyway, astrophobia, fear of thunder and lightning. Well, I might have that one dotted, but yeah, I've never been struck by lightning, so yeah. Autophobia, fear of being alone. All depends, I guess, on one's mood. Claustrophobia, oh gosh. See, this is the reason why I don't go spelunking more often. Well, spelunking is also fear of falling and getting hurt and like getting your bones broken and stuff. Legs broken. Sorry, repositioning myself here a second. Yeah, fear of confined spaces, definitely. I mean, I'm definitely afraid of that stuff. Because you just want to go crazy, man. You just have a fit. So I just never go up. Never want to be confined in a closed space. It's just really hard to deal with. You have to, oh man. I don't even want to think about that. So, hemophobia. It's hemophobia, fear of blood. Sure, but I mean, like, so like, I don't know. I suppose maybe I don't know if it's a fear. This is kind of a revulsion or repulsion or whatever. This is more of I just want to vomit. It's just, grosses me out. The blood. I don't think I'm afraid of the blood. Of course, if someone, the fear is if you lose enough blood, you're going to die, But anyway, hydrophobia, fear of water. Not really me. Ophidiophobia, I have a moderate fear of snakes. At least if they're poisonous, right? Zoophobia, fear of animals, nah. Of course, around tigers, if there's no fence, obviously you want to. Sure, because it's something like tigers, of course, but algophobia, fear of pain. Sure, moderate fear of that. Who doesn't? You have to be like, it probably helps to be in the Marine Corps to be, but that sort of thing. You kind of have to like it, like pain. That sort of thing. Atychiphobia, fear of failure. Bathmophobia, fear of stairs and steep slopes. It's not that big of a fear, but it's definitely a part of my psyche. Be afraid of that stuff a little bit. Catagolophobia, fear of being ridiculed. That's an interesting one. I have a moderate fear of that, actually. Sometimes it's associated with fear of speaking in public. It's not extreme, but if I have a whole bunch of people laughing at me, yeah, that's been in my nightmares, I would say, in the past. Catoptrophobia, fear of mirrors. No, it's not really me. Coulrophobia, nope, I don't have a fear of clowns. Sorry, folks. Stephen King might be pretty convincing, of course, that way. But cynophobia, fear of dogs, that was only when I was a little tyke, not anymore. Dentophobia, fear of dentists, it's very minor, but yeah, it's there. Entomophobia, fear of insects, sure, the stingers and stuff. Glossophobia, fear of speaking in public. Again, for me, it's not a big deal, but for me, it's connected with catagelophobia, fear of being ridiculed or laughed at. Yeah. Herpetophobia, fear of reptiles, very minor fear. Latrophobia, fear of doctors, again, minor fear. Lilapsophobia, fear of tornadoes and hurricanes. Yeah. Necrophobia, fear of death, dead things. Noctophobia, fear of the night. Nosocomophobia, fear of hospitals. No. Nyctophobia, fear of the dark, very minor. Try to keep that within reason, but after seeing a scary movie, it's always, just plays with your imagination a bit. Ornithophobia, fear of birds. It's just the birds with big beak. It's just the macaws that go crazy, folks. Sure, because I don't want them to bite my fingers off, sort of thing, of course. Little birds, not a big deal. Pteromerhanophobia, fear of flying. Pyrophobia, fear of fire. Yeah. Scolionophobia, fear of school. I think that fear of school would have something to do with bullies and tests, especially bullies. If anyone's afraid of that stuff, even into their adult years, it's memories of school was really, yeah. Sociophobia, fear of social evaluation. It's very minor for me, but it's definitely there. Yeah, definitely there. Tachnophobia, fear of speed. Trypanophobia, fear of needles and injections. Of course, it's minor, sure, but believe me, it was a big thing when I was little. Of course. Wiccophobia, fear of witches and witchcraft. See, the thing is, folks, witches are, I guess, female witches. I guess you have male witches, but they're just regular people. So, of course, like clowns, they're just regular people. Why would you fear them? The fear is the fear of evil, which we'll get into. It's just I don't want to get involved in that stuff. But of course, the fantasy or the horror, which is fantasy horror, like Roald Dahl's witches. Okay, so here we go. When it comes to movies, notice there's there's more underlined stuff here than there is in the real life fears. The real life fears, for me, have a lot to do with either feeling pain, some kind of form of pain, or death, right? Death and pain, or for the most part, or perhaps claustrophobia is very unique. That one's very, very unique. Just not being able to move. Gosh darn it, man. It's a very different kind of fear. But definitely know what that fear is like. Social evaluation, I think, is a little different sort of thing, but along with the fear of being ridiculed, but it's not as it's not as big of a deal, I think, somewhat. Okay, here we go. So, death, yeah, minorly. The dark, yeah, a bit more, because in movies you can't see what's going on. You can't see what's going on, and it's like, what's going on? Creepy crawlies, yeah, that one's a little bit for me, sure, not very much. Scary places, that one I'm a bigger fan of, especially if you combine that with imaginative stuff. So if you have these big, huge labyrinths, mazes and stuff, and they're very imaginative and varied, and they have all these different beings and different moralities, and that's kind of a fantasy thing in general, fantasy horror crossover. But yeah, you can get very. I mean, that for me, it's very intriguing. It's always a go-to kind of thing here. Sorry, I went sick here, folks. I'm gonna just do this really quick. Okay. So let's see here. Where was I? Watching a little TV here. So I mentioned scary places. Yeah, I'm a fan of that stuff. disfigurement. It's like, for instance, the Phantom of the Opera. Yeah, I have to admit, when I'm watching something and there's some very disfigured beings, whether they're human or otherwise, we're usually talking about human disfigurement. Yeah, that can really be a little bit frightening. But of course, we all know about the guys that are good guys that are disfigured. Phantom of the Opera is kind of, that was part of the whole plot, is the disfigured guy anyway. But you have Chunk from the Goonies, and you have Quasimodo. So it's interesting when they include that element in a lot of stories. But dismemberment, like for instance the Saw movies, that just has to do with pain and torture, right? I'm not as frightened by dismemberment compared to disfigurement or scary places or the dark. It's one of those things where dismemberment for me is like more of a vomit, like gross out. It's a gross out thing, like the blood thing, right? It's like, oh, I can't watch this, but it's not like I'm afraid of it. I'm not afraid of it. It's just kind of like, oh. Anyway, suspense, right? For instance, the Paranormal Activity type movies. At least the first one, when we started having the same thing, it got old, right? Just waiting for something to happen, nothing happens for a bit, and that one little thing, and you're like, ah! So I admit, I am a fan of suspense. It can get me a little bit scared. Scary music, of course, I'm a composer, so I know how it works, but I love it when it's really awesome. Yep, great ingredient there. Lightning and thunder, real life is more frightening with that whole thing than lightning, thunder in movies. That's nothing. Fear of the unusual, yeah. Evil clowns. They have evil clowns as a example, but I think this is associated later on. I have also like the evil alien thing, and just the weird factor, weird creatures. Fear of the unusual. I would put that more, for instance, in The Thing. The Thing would be a good example of the fear of the unusual, or Alien kind of, or The Thing, or the Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Again, the alien thing is, these things are very unusual, right? Or if you're not sure how a certain alien or certain kind of being operates or works quite yet, or Tremors is more like a big bad or big monster thing, but yeah, it's a moderate fear there. I'm always a fan of that stuff, especially if you don't know how something quite operates yet. Whether it's something just primal, animalistic, or something more intelligent. Anyway, buildings with a mind of their own. This is like The Shining, right? Oh, I love that theme. Oh, it can be very frightening because it's like the haunted house thing, but the haunted house thing is kind of it's a very it's all we have a lot of haunted house movies, right? But it's just, again, the question is, if a building has a mind of its own, what kind of mind does it have? And it's just very mysterious, It's very, very supernatural. Love it. I can get really scared with that stuff. Or at least I'm very invested. I get very invested with frightening movies that are kind of like that. The scary kid thing. Once you've seen, like, The Children of the Corn, but you also have The Village of the Damned. There's a lot of movies that have scary kids. I think it's kind of been done. I'm not saying it's completely exhausted, but I mean, come on, kids, But yeah, it's still kind of or The Omen, somewhat, but in a way. But it's kind of like, well, anyway, a lot of movies that have scary kids. It's really easy to not do it right. You have to do it justice. But inexplicable beings. I guess this is kind of part of the weird factor with the fear of the unusual, I think. I should have put that with the aliens and not knowing who to trust. Yeah, that can be something that would be very gripping to me. Trying to figure out what to make of different characters in a movie. Absolutely. And that's kind of across the board in general. Dolls and dummies, that's just a minor thing for me. But somewhat. It's medium to somewhat. It's been overdone. Maybe. Kind of. Depends on what kind of doll you're talking about. There's still a lot of potential for stuff because there's so many different kinds of dolls and puppets and things. But yeah, a lot of folks are getting a little bit bored with that stuff. But again, it all depends on how it's handled. These next four were mentioned in a website. I get so sick and tired of this crap in scary movies. No phone coverage. Jump scares, yeah, that's a given, but that's the vengeful spirit and the abandoned place. Yeah, we all know the cheap and overused elements, along with a few other things I didn't mention here, but yeah, this is like the B-budget horror stuff. B-budget horror staples. Obviously, demons and Satan. Oh yeah, of course. Sure. You can always be brave as you can be, but yeah. Witchcraft and Ouija boards. Ouija board movies have really sucked a lot of times, and I think there's some potentials there, but we're talking about straight up kind of real evil. At least if you believe in it, I believe in real evil, witchcraft. If you don't believe that stuff is that big of a deal, then you won't find it's frightening. But if it in a really well done movie, yeah, it can be pretty frightening. But there's some really bad Ouija movies out there, so it's just that kind of colors it a bit, I think. But demonic possession, obviously, there's just hundreds of them now. Everybody jumped on the Exorcist bandwagon, so they vary. The Rite is another movie, along with all the other ones. The Rite is pretty decent. There's a lot of really cheesy demonic possession movies. So, unfortunately, because it's so much, the market's saturated with all these bad demonic possession movies, it kind of makes it less frightening. But again, if it's well done, it's well done. So, yeah, ghosts, obviously a middling, frightening thing for me. Obviously, I can find ghosts if you do it well, if you do it right. Yeah, they can be frightening, sure. Evil aliens, obviously, they can be, medium interest. I mean, pagan practices. So, of course, if you're a pagan, you might find this humorous. Like, folks, I'm talking not about pagans necessarily. I'm talking about certain practices. And this is just me. Everybody's a little different. But obviously, there are certain practices, to me, there are certain practices that are a part of it. Depends on the pagan belief and everything. But there are certain things that can be done that, to me, strike chords of something ominous, in my psyche. So it's a minor thing. But obviously, if you have somebody that you come across in some village in a movie who's got a whole bunch of, weird herbs all over the place and all these, animal parts and things, what are you going to do? Yeah, I mean, yeah. Obviously thinking, oh, is this a friendly witch? Or is this like a, or is this like a, So it catches your eye. It might, your heart's only going to skip a beat if you're seeing something that's more particularly, I would say, than peculiar, strange, bizarre behavior, which I'll get to in a bit. But pagan practices can be peculiar, strange, and bizarre. So there's that kind of that spectrum there. So go ahead, laugh away, pagans. It's okay. No, you're not scary necessarily. I know you try to be, and all witches and stuff. Whatever, It's just that there's certain practices that, I don't do myself, and I find them a little bit frightening in movies. Okay, so there you go. And some of you guys, it draws you into that sort of stuff. If you, I know there's some people that just are like fascinated by that stuff, and I get it. So anyway, okay, the mysterious cryptic objects and media. Yeah, minorly interesting, frightening, can be, catches your eye maybe, but some of this stuff isn't mentioned on the website. Some of this is just from my own psyche. So some of the stuff I've had help from the internet. Some of the stuff is just from my own awareness of scary stuff and what I find really frightening in movies. Losing control of your body and senses, or different states of consciousness. Absolutely, that's something that's in there. This is why we find mushrooms intriguing. Some of us personal experiences here. Some of us are just like, oh my gosh, Alice in Wonderland. But like for instance, in the movie The Witches, it's like more for kids and stuff, but it's still a pretty scary movie. And when the little boy, what's his name? Well, anyway, when he gets shrunk down to a mouse, witches are like trying to kill him. Yeah, that kind of stuff. Or when you have a character who's really tired and they're not as able to get away from some scary situation or place, or all kinds of stuff like that, or some substance is causing the senses to be impaired, and get some bad boys that want to do something bad to them or something, So obviously nightmares. You know, you guys. I mentioned this before in other videos. I don't know why we haven't had more movies that are based around nightmares. I mean, very vivid nightmares. But yeah, the nonsensical aspect of dreams, that can be just so good in a movie. But I don't know. Nightmares should be done. The ones with arrows, right, pointing, should be ones that people should be doing more. We should have more movies like that stuff. Peculiar, strange, bizarre behaviors. You know, if you see somebody in a movie, right? Let's say in the opening of a movie, and there's no music, you just see this guy. You see him riding a unicycle, right? He's just riding a unicycle, right? Doesn't have to be a clown. But let's say he starts doing these weird hand motions, and then like it's impressive, right? Where maybe he's rubbing his belly and he's patting his head, and he's also able to ride his unicycle at the same time. But the no hands thing, maybe it's like starts getting to the point where it's almost like a supernatural thing. He's able to do these amazing stunts. That's one example. Like, of course, you're thinking, oh, this is kind of a gesture, like clown thing, right? Well, there's also like the kind of person. Maybe you see a person walking at the very beginning of a movie in a park. They're walking along a pathway, and then for no apparent reason, they start walking backwards. Then they start walking forward again. They start working backwards. And let's say a person, is just watching, what's happening with this guy. And you think, oh, this guy is kind of crazy or he's insane or whatever. He's lost his mind. And all of a sudden that person who's watching this other person from a ways away, the person who's walking funny looks immediately, like in a split second, immediately at the person. He's ways off and he's just looking right at him with a really intense expression. That to me is that can be that kind of stuff, right? Okay. Of course, you have deja vu and premonitions. Yeah, I mean, that added to the suspensefulness of the Matrix. With the deja vu with the cat. And when you have these things that, happen in movies where it's some kind of mental something, right? It's just something that's just really kind of like, what the heck's going on? I love that stuff in scary movies, personally. And of course, immense monsters. I know they're kind of a little bit cliche. If they're done right, if they're very, very frightening visually, I think that, obviously thinking dragons and fantasy, but, it can be all kinds of Cthulhu, that guy, along with the weird factor, right? Shapeshifters, they're basically kind of demons, more or less, because demons are shapeshifters. But shapeshifters, if you have shapeshifters in movies, this is like one of those fantasy things. This is why people have issues with fantasy. It's like, oh, this is just a way around, or like, oh, it's a shapeshifter, So maybe it's some kind of like whodunit or some kind of suspenseful thing, or you're wondering who to trust. And if you have shapeshifter characters, it's just kind of like, right? I guess what I'm referring to is you're using shapeshifters not in a mystery, not whodunit type of thing. More kind of a you don't know they're shapeshifters. Maybe you assume that whatever creature you're talking about that's their natural form, and maybe you start getting this feeling like you are talking about shapeshifters in a movie, but you're not sure yet. But it's not necessarily something where you're trying to pin down some crime on some particular person or being. I think it's a theme that can be very, can be well done. It's just a question of how you handle it, I suppose. Embarrassment, of course, sure. You don't want to be embarrassed in real life, a lot of us. And then when you see people, I'm talking about extreme embarrassment. For instance, the movie It, when Beverly Marsh, in the 1990 version at least, comes back and visits Derry or whatever, that scene where It is laughing at her, the clown, Pennywise, laughing at her because she was so afraid, frightened by seeing her abusive dad. Pennywise is taking that form. Or, having to drink I guess it was blood in the movie, but in the book it was poop or something, or liquid poop. Whatever, that, and then it laughing at her because, laughing at her expense. That's the kind of embarrassment. There's other kinds of embarrassment, of course, but that kind of stuff. It's just like, and that's a very demonic kind of thing, very demonic kind of attitude. This is why bullies and teasing can be, can go that direction. It can often be so reviled or so malicious, as it has to do with the mocking or that oh, I can't believe you're so frightened by this stuff, kind of stuff. Yeah, and then the corresponding embarrassment and anger. Yeah. Oh yeah, and it explored all those emotions so well. Anyway, you have, and of course, there's still the undead. Vampires and werewolves. Yeah, but to be honest, not really. I'm not really frightened. But if you have a really well done movie, I might be a little bit frightened if the fangs are particularly long. I think vampires have a certain quality about them that they can be a little bit frightening still too. Skeletons haven't ever really been done justice to, in my opinion, in terms of having some truly frightening skeletons. It's associated with pirates. It's like, oh, this is kind of like kiddie fare a little bit. But you can have some very frightening movies potentially with skeletons and stuff. And werewolves kind of like vampires, just hairier, a little bit. Big teeth, big mouths, and gigantic werewolf would be, yeah, especially very lightning fast type. Oh yeah, with the claws and everything, yeah. Of course, you have other critter, monster movies. You have the gremlins and stuff. So seeing all this stuff and getting into the Halloween and the month of Halloween. Curious what you guys are afraid of. If any of this stuff, if you agree with it, disagree with it, it's more of a kind of a personal thing, right? We're all a little afraid of something a little different. There's definitely some similarities in what we're afraid of. Obviously, we're probably all afraid in real life of being way up high on some place, and we have to steel ourselves to not be afraid of that sort of thing. And maybe claustrophobia is pretty universal, I think, too. And we're probably all a little bit bored by all the demonic possession movies, right? But a very well done movie about straight up evil and demons is, if it's well done, yeah, that's usually pretty frightening. But that was that nightmare idea. So much still there to do. The Babadook was kind of I thought it was a decent movie, but it operated more like a nightmare. That's why I think it had some more power to it. But there's so much more that you could have done. And by the way, Neil Gaiman is so good in this area. He does fantasy, but when he did Mirror Mask, it was the fact that it was dreamlike adds extra dimensions to it. Both with regard to the imaginative quality of it, it's very peaceful, and also the more frightening aspects, and even other aspects too that are just the mind-bending stuff, right? The weird land kind of stuff. All right. Well, I will catch you guys later. Leave me thoughts and comments below. I'll catch you guys later. Take care. Bye.